Hi, hello. I ended up having a lot of unexpected and unintentional free time starting in the summer of 2023, and I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool. What if I tried to be like a YouTuber that released a video every week? And what if I made a review of every video game I had played in 2023? I kind of played too many games, started this idea a little too late, and there is not enough weeks left in the year for me to have a new review every week. So instead of just dumping all of the remaining reviews as individual videos, I'm dumping all of them as one big video. Anyway, here you go. I don't know if I'm putting time codes in or not. I think YouTube just does it automatically with like AI or robots or something. Whatever, you know how it goes. All right, thank you for watching. Okay, bye-bye, bye-bye, thank you. I've been hearing about Ghost Trick and how great it is for years. So when it finally came out on modern gaming systems, aka stuff that isn't the DS, I was pretty interested in giving it a shot. It's basically a visual novel, but with some puzzle mechanics. You have to solve these Rube Goldberg-like contraptions to fix some of these scenarios. Ghost Trick does have a pretty distinct art style, which I actually really liked. It's not quite anime, it's cartoony in its own sort of visual flair, and I enjoyed that. I actually think the design of this game is really good. The game looks pretty fascinating, honestly. It's endearing, and it's not something you really see in other games. It's kind of own version of cartoon that I liked. The plot is a mystery. Basically, you wake up and you find your dead corpse, and you have to figure out who killed you. And you have these little ghost powers that allow you to interact with objects, and you have to figure out what objects to interact with in what way to solve different scenarios, all while trying to figure out the reason you died and uncovering this big mystery plot. It's pretty exciting, actually. The game isn't that long, and it never really wears out its welcome. I thought the story and the writing was pretty engaging. It kept me invested the whole way through, which is good because a lot of the game is talking. They talk right before the gameplay, they talk in between gameplay segments, and they talk at the end of every chapter. There's a lot of dialogue that happens. So it's good that the writing and the story are done as well as they are, otherwise the game would be pretty boring to get through. The gameplay itself, the interacting with different objects, is really fun. You get to solve puzzles. There are very specific ways you're supposed to solve them, which can get a little tedious, but at no point did I think any puzzle in this game was bad. I thought they were all pretty solid and done very well, and it's fun and engaging to try and figure out just exactly how to manipulate what objects in what ways to get the result that you want. Ghost Trick, though, is just such an interesting, unique experience that can only be had in video games, and only specifically in Ghost Trick. Another way of saying that is there is only one thing like Ghost Trick, and it's Ghost Trick, and I kind of like that about it. The music is also really good, and that's all this note says, and I will say that it did take me a little bit of time to get invested in the game. The opening level of Ghost Trick has a lot of dialogue and text, and it can be really slow, and then you might think, oh, the game is just going to be going at this really slow pace, but that's not true. Just the first chapter or two, like maybe the first 40 minutes of the game is going to be a little bit slow because there's a lot of text going on. They have to explain all the mechanics, but afterwards the game really starts picking up and it becomes really engaging and really fun. I guess I would say that the ratio between text and gameplay slanted ever more in gameplay's favor as the game went on, and because of that, the game gets better. Overall, I'll say it took me a second or two to get invested, but once I did get invested, I was hooked, and Ghost Trick really lived up to its reputation. It's just a great game. So I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Well, maybe not like compared to other Lord of the Rings fans, but compared to an average person, I am a pretty big fan of Lord of the Rings. I was very excited when they announced Return to Moria. I think it was the same time they announced Golem, and I was looking forward to it. I thought it was going to be a lot of fun. I hadn't really played a survival-like, Valheim-like game. I've actually never played Minecraft before. So I was actually pretty excited to play this. We got to be in Moria, my favorite part of the movie and books, so let's get into it. How was Return to Moria? Well, it's a survival-like game. You mine minerals, you farm materials, you kill orcs and wolves and stuff. You basically need to craft a specific item or tool that allows you to progress to the next zone, like an upgraded pickaxe or materials to repair a device like an elevator or pipes or something like that. The game has bosses, which are fine. The combat overall is pretty simplistic. Left click a bunch to swing your weapon, right click to block. There's a roll that you can do. It's not the worst. It's not the most engaging either, though. The real thing about Return to Moria is that the progress doesn't feel great. My friend and I were progressing in Return to Moria. It always felt like we just restarted every level we went to. Every time we got to a new zone, everything got reset back to 0. Okay, time to go back and figure out how we farm these correct resources to build up gear and weapons that let us actually progress more or deal with a current situation. It never really felt like I was getting more powerful. It always felt like a triangle on a graph, like a parabola, right? Like we would go up and then you'd go back down and then you'd have to restart all over again. It wasn't particularly rewarding, I guess. Now, what I said there was pretty interesting if you were paying attention and might be a problem on my end. To be fair with the game, I only played Return to Moria with one other person. And Return to Moria does feel like it was a game designed to be played with more than 2 people. I just couldn't find anyone else willing to play the game with me. This was by far my most anticipated game for 2023, and I just didn't find it very fun or enjoyable. It felt pretty monotonous. I don't like being a downer, but it definitely was a bummer playing Return to Moria and it not being as fun as I thought it would. Now, as I said before, I don't really play these types of games. I just really like Lord of the Rings. So I don't know if I think the game itself is bad. It isn't for me. And, I don't necessarily think the job of this game was to convert survival, mining, farming like gamers into liking Lord of the Rings, but to have Lord of the Rings fans be converted into liking the type of game Return to Moria is. And it just didn't succeed for me. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Pikmin fan. I've only ever played one Pikmin game, and when I played it, it wasn't too long ago. However, I did enjoy it. I thought it was pretty cool, and so when they announced Pikmin 4, I was interested and willing to give it a shot. Now, I downloaded the Nintendo eShop demo for Pikmin 4, and I got really bored while playing it. It was really sluggish. They kept interrupting me with tutorials and talking, and I found that all really boring and slow, and so I decided it wasn't for me. A couple months went by, and every time I heard about Pikmin 4 being talked about, people were saying it was really good, and they also said that the beginning of the game was by far the worst and slowest parts. So I got Pikmin 4, and I'm gonna be honest, they were correct. The opening of the game, there's a lot of tutorials, there's a lot of explanations. When they give you freedom to do stuff, the game is actually super fun. Pikmin 4 has got good graphics, it's got good vibes, and it's got good gameplay. You kind of go around these sort of bigger worlds, these big levels, and you collect Pikmin, right? And they are all these little puzzles to collect treasure using the Pikmin that you gather. There's different types of Pikmin that are used for different things. Red Pikmin can take fire damage, yellow Pikmin can take electricity but also be thrown farther, blue Pikmin can go underwater, there's ice, there's so many other Pikmin that you all see on the cover of the box. A lot of Pikmin that are used sort of like ways to solve little puzzles, and I really enjoyed that. I think the overall gameplay flow, the cycle, whatever the word is that I'm forgetting right now, loop, that's what it's called. The gameplay loop of Pikmin is very good. I like it a lot. I think it's really fun. They also have these different sort of side modes of standard Pikmin in the game. The Dundari battle mode is neat. I don't hate it. I do wish it was more optional because I didn't care for it. Like, once I did it once, I didn't really need to do it ever again, except for the fact the game wants you to do it multiple times. And I was told this is like Pikmin 2 multiplayer. Never played Pikmin 2. so I've never played its multiplayer. It's whatever. I just really wish I didn't have to do it as many times as the game made it mandatory to do. I think this is probably where I stand away from the other Pikmin 4 fans or defenders or whatever, is I feel very similarly about the caves. Like, the caves are cool and neat, and I like how they eventually have more focused challenges, but I did just prefer the big sprawling levels to the caves. You know, these cave sections, you go down a pipe, you go to caverns, you go from level to level, and they felt like more condensed, specific areas, but it kind of takes away a lot of this charm of being in a big open sort of section. Again, I don't think the caves are bad. I think the caves are fine. I like them, but I don't like them nearly as much as I like the core game, I guess, or the core levels. I also didn't love the nighttime stages. Again, there's something that I thought was fine. I just didn't care too much for them, and I didn't like how mandatory the amount of them I had to do was. But again, the main worlds and levels were unbelievably good. The game has a post-game, which is also just fantastic. I really liked Pikmin 4. I thought this game was super fun. I'm glad I ended up listening to the people in my life and on the internet who are saying the game gets better beyond the opening tutorials and explanations. The game does still have a lot of interruptions with those tutorials and explanations, and, you know, it has parts that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I still really like this game. I thought it was incredibly fun. I highly recommend it. Even if you've never played Pikmin before, especially if you haven't played Pikmin before, there kind of are no other games like Pikmin. Mechanically, really solid, visually really unique, and you'd be surprised how many hours you can just dump into effectively, creatively solving puzzles. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just a fun game, man. I really liked Pikmin 4. I thought this game rocked. Okay, I'm going to be pretty biased here because I love the Metroid series, and I am a very big fan of Metroid Prime already, but talking about the remaster for the Switch, I definitely think this version is the best version to play because you get to use 2 analog sticks. Moving the camera around with the right stick is just such a normal, standard upgrade that it's worth the 2 or so graphical losses that happen with the port. The actual game is very fun. Prime is able to capture everything that makes 2D Metroid so great and carry it all over into the third dimension pretty well. It's got meaningful upgrades, good level designs, the levels are all distinct and unique. I mean, when you're going through lava levels and snow levels and forest levels and ancient ruins and even the water levels, they have a pretty good flow to them. Backtracking isn't that big of a deal. The map is really cool. Their ability to scan to figure out clues and solve puzzles. I think this aspect of the game is really strong. On top of the combat, being able to use missiles and different types of beams and combinations, I think is great. Honestly, I think the gameplay element of Metroid Prime is balanced really well with how good the level design is. If the level design wasn't as good as it was, and if the gameplay wasn't as good as it was, this game wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't work, which is a pretty basic sentence to say, but I think some games get away with having good gameplay and some games get away with having good levels, but this game kind of needs both to work, and it works. Prime just doesn't feel like any other FPS out there, which, to be fair, could be considered a good thing or a bad thing. The first-person platforming is pretty solid for the most part, and that's mainly because of how high and floaty the jump is. The strafe firing and different charge beams and different types of visors are all used in pretty interesting ways between what's weak to what's strong against what, how you deal with certain problems. I'll say that the bosses are okay. I don't remember any of them being exceptional or great, but I don't recall any being the worst. The final boss is pretty rough though, to be honest. I like the idea of scanning and getting the story of the world and the Phazon and the Chozo and the space pirates. All of that's really cool world building, and it's done in a really neat way. You don't just come across some survivor who then just explains the plot of the game. You kind of have to figure it out through the corpses and the ruins of what's left on the planet. Metroid Prime is a quieter, slower paced game than the normal FPS. Not saying it doesn't have its action moments, it's just done at a different pace. levels, and I think that's neat. The ending is probably the worst part of the game, honestly. It does its own little Wind Waker Triforce hunt at the end, and that's pretty lame, having to go around finding specific items, though it makes sense in a Metroid game, since the point is kind of to explore and solve puzzles, and you get new abilities and weapons which help you unlock other rooms and sections of previously visited areas. However, being forced to kind of go back, scour the whole map all over again to find just a handful of Chozo relics, that's not super cool. And then I'll say the Metroids combined with the endgame platforming can be really frustrating. Getting knocked down and then having to do your platforming all over again, it's not fun. Outside of that though, I think Metroid Prime is an incredibly good and fun video game. Just solid gameplay, great level design, good music. I didn't mention the music. The music in this game is sick. I think it's visually pretty fun. And I mean, again, I am very biased when it comes to Metroid games. This is no different. I liked Prime before you could control the camera with a stick, so I think the game is certainly worth checking out. It's very good. I highly, highly recommend it. Real good game. Very good video game, Metroid Prime. And it still is. Kill the Crows is pretty cool. So the way Kill the Crows works is you're in this one arena that has a bunch of geometry to run around and block bullets and dodge different attacks. Every enemy dies in one shot, and so do you. It's just an arcade game where you fire off bullets at enemies as waves of them keep coming at you. Each enemy is visually and mechanically distinct. Big guys, melee guys, gun guys, machine gun guys, fire guys. You can figure out what they do and how to deal with them relatively easily. You also have this sort of ultimate showdown ability. As you go through each attempt and complete more achievements and tasks, you unlock more gear to mix and match, including charging your gun and your showdown. The boss you keep fighting, and it's just the one boss, is okay. The boss is okay. He's nothing special. He serves what he needs to serve. He is what he needs to be. I really enjoy Kill the Crows. I like arcade games, and Kill the Crows is pretty addictive. You die and then just hit tab and you're right back to gaming again. There isn't a lot to talk about with the game because what you see is what you get. I personally like playing this game while watching a stream or a YouTube video on one monitor, or even just putting on some music and jamming out while clicking enemies. It's fun. It's, not every game needs to have like a big story, and Kill the Crows has a story, but I mean, it doesn't matter. I just like clicking on things and moving around and trying to complete the different achievements while trying to also get as far as I can, basically going for high scores. It's fun. I like the different showdowns, though they're all kind of similar in their own ways, and I like the different guns, even though they're all also kind of similar in their own ways. This game's still getting updated, so it can always be better. It's not an early access, it's just a small indie game, but it's also a very fun one. I don't need every game I play to be some big, epic, open world, dramatic narrative. It can just be a fun arcade game, and that's what Kill the Crows is to me. It's fun. It's very readable, it's very understandable, and it plays pretty well. I think if you haven't played a game like Kill the Crows, it's certainly worth checking out because you can dump a lot of time into it. And hey, if you only got like 10 minutes to kill, you could get like 2 to 3 rounds in on this game, depending on how good or bad you are, or how much you're paying attention. It's a fun game. I recommend it, and I really do think more people should check it out. The Lamplighters League. This is a turn-based strategy game with a focus on stealth mechanics, and it was okay. I was actually really looking forward to this because one of my favorite movie franchises is Indiana Jones. I really like that type of pulpy fiction, and I was more than willing to play a strategy game set in that sort of style. Let's get into it. Like I said, turn-based strategy. It's got to focus on stealth. There's kind of 2 modes. You run around as your group of characters, and that's a stealth mode. You can crouch and avoid detection, but you also have these takedown abilities. You have little traps that can lure enemies away, and you have just knockout abilities that takes them down before you get into the turn-based tactics section. The turn-based tactics section is actually okay. It's fun, honestly. I think they have some pretty strong abilities, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit later, but overall, I thought the moment-to-moment gameplay, both the stealth and the in-combat tactics section, was pretty good. So the way the game kind of works is you go on missions with a team of 3 characters, sometimes 4, but usually 3 characters, and they take place in a procedurally generated map, and usually there is a goal of blowing up a tower or something, or stealing certain artifacts, and then the mission ends. You go in and then you have to escape. The game is a little bit buggy, so I would recommend, if you play this game on PC at the very least, to save a couple times during each mission. My characters certainly got stuck in geometry a couple of times, which required me to restart the level because I'm not super big on save scumming, but I would recommend doing it for this game. The goal of Lamplighters League is you're supposed to steal a special magical item from each of the lead faction leaders and then combine them with 4 keystones that you need to find in order to open up a magical tower. There's this really cool gameplay mechanic where as the enemy faction gets closer to victory, the enemies get harder and stronger. They stop being these guards and they start being like monsters or more advanced guards. So the game kind of has its own dynamic difficulty curve as the player characters get stronger as the game progresses, so therefore the enemies get stronger. You're in a race against the clock to complete a bunch of missions, all while the enemy factions are also racing against you. Lamplighters League has a level up system and slight customization. You know, you can make your melee character deal more melee damage or your gun character do more gun damage or whatever. The different characters are unique, but it definitely felt like because there is such a limited time, you can only do 1 mission per round, and you're racing against the enemy faction to get all these pieces and keystones, you really don't have the time to go and recruit more characters without putting yourself in a very bad position. So I didn't have a lot of newer characters to play around with. I just kind of used the same 3 or 4 characters for every mission. I assume the tower is the last mission of the game because after getting all 3 special items and all 4 keystones, the enemy faction bar filled up and I ended up losing. So I'd have to restart the whole game again. My issue with this concept of the enemy bar filling up isn't so much that there is a timer, but there is a separate timer from 3 separate factions and the mitigation is all luck. So yeah, I guess the big twist in this review is there isn't 1 enemy faction you're fighting. There are 3 enemy factions that all have their own bars that fill up gradually over time at various different rates, and if one of them fills up completely, you lose. And how those bars fill up can be random, and if you do a mission, that may subtract some points from a bar, but only 1 enemy bar. And like I said, there are required missions you need to do, and I just don't feel like they reduced this sort of enemy level up process enough. That was my experience. I don't know. I'm kind of new to this type of XCOM style game. For me personally, it felt like it was just too easy for one faction to get a massive lead and then keep it, and then it was really hard to try and rein in one enemy faction because the other 2 would then just catch up. I liked the idea and style of Lamplighters League, though the procedurally generated levels were starting to get dull by the end, and bricking a campaign 20 hours into a run didn't fill me with a lot of motivation to start all over again. I didn't think Lamplighters League was a bad game. It had some pretty solid ideas. I actually like the art style. I wish it wasn't so buggy. It definitely had a lot of bugs when I played it. If I was better at the game, maybe I would have liked it more. Like if I actually got to the tower and I didn't lose, after getting all the special items and almost all of the keystones. But even then, at 20 plus hours, it felt like the game was stretching its gameplay time pretty thin as it was. I guess the last thing I'll say is that this game convinced me that I should probably try an XCOM game. Feel like I'd like them. Yeah, I'm a pretty big Warhammer 40k fan. Huge Warhammer 40k fan, so Boltgun's an easy sell for me. I'm not too into old school FPS games though. However, I will say the gameplay of Boltgun is real fun. It felt a lot like Halo 1, Halo 2 gameplay to me. You go through hallways and corridors and valleys or whatever, shooting cultists and demons and stuff. Dude, I spelled cultist super wrong in this. Anyway. But then you also get to these big arena sections, and if you ever want to watch my first ever YouTube video, I talk about how Halo 1 does this exact same thing. They're kind of like bursts, you know? You go through a hallway or a corridor or something, and then you get to an arena section. Hallway, arena section, hallway, arena section. And Boltgun's pretty similar in that vein. So the gameplay is also similar in that it's really fun. The weapons are fun, the levels are fun, exploring the levels are also a pretty good time. These guns have a lot of kick to them, a lot of flair to them. They not only visually look really cool, they also feel really good to use. And that's in part due to the sound effects. The music and sound design are really good on top of the very stylish and cool graphics. There isn't too much to really dig into with Boltgun. It looks good, it sounds good, and the gameplay is fun. I personally really enjoyed it, and I don't really have any real nostalgia or experience with stuff like Doom or Quake or Unreal Tournament, but I do remember what it was like growing up with Halo 1 and 2 and 3, and while Boltgun probably doesn't hit as close to old school Halo as much as it hits to actual old school games, it does hit a little nostalgic bone in me because it plays a lot more like the FPSs I played growing up more than it does the shooters I play now, like Hunt Showdown or Apex. You know, I think there's a reason that a lot of people really enjoy Boltgun. It's stylish, but it's also really fun. It's not too long of a game. I think it took me like 5-ish hours to beat, and there is some stuff to explore and to collect, and you can play the game on harder difficulties and try to get better scores, which is stuff I always like being included, but the actual standard experience isn't too long or frustrating. I will say that sometimes platforming can be annoying, and that one teleporter level absolutely sucked. That one teleporter level was not fun, but everything else was really good. I don't have too much else to say about Boltgun. I had a great time playing this game, and I wasn't expecting this game to exist, but once I saw it, I went, oh, I hope it's good, man. I hope it's good. Because, you know, when something looks as good as Boltgun does, there's always that voice in the back of your head that says that it's going to be a disappointment. And God, I'm so glad it wasn't. This game kicked some serious ass. What a good time. You should check it out. Okay, the big one. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of Breath of the Wild, and I wasn't too excited about Breath of the Wild, but now car building mechanics. I'll spoil the review here, though, and say that I do like this game. I think Tears of the Kingdom is good. I like it as a game that I can just put on and play. I think the dungeons are better than in Breath of the Wild, and I think the shrines are better too. I like that they give you the tools needed to solve the little puzzles in the shrines, and you have to figure out how to put these tools and pieces together in order to get the solutions. I like that. I like that a lot more than the shrines from Breath of the Wild. The world of Tears of the Kingdom is huge, and it has a lot of quests in it, and a good amount of the quests that I played were pretty fun, or at least inoffensive. I didn't mind the Underdark, or whatever it's called. That was also fine. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say the sky levels count as an extra world or zone or whatever, because it is very small in comparison to the other two. One of the bigger issues I had with the game was with the building mechanic. I don't like that you need a steering wheel to drive stuff, and I didn't like needing batteries to power your devices also. Like, it makes sense that you would need those things, but it also wasn't fun to have to farm batteries or constantly go and pick up steering wheels if I wanted a car to work. I ultimately just preferred warping to towers and gliding around than making any machinery because it didn't require any additional items to do that. At the same time, I thought the fusibility, particularly fusing items onto arrows, was really fun, and it's a really cool mechanic. Different stuff you fuse to different arrows have different effects, like freezing enemies or blowing them up or whatever. That was dope. And the Ultra Hand was a really good decision to have over whatever it was called. Magnesis, Magnesium, Magneta, whatever. I don't know. I don't care. But that hand being able to take like anything instead of just metal stuff was a really good addition. Being able to pick up so many different objects and fuse them together went to a lot of creativity, but it also went to like just getting through certain stuff. It really changes the perspective of how you look at Tears of the Kingdom once you have just like this ability to pick up so many items and doodads in a way that I thought was really good. I didn't think the story of Tears of the Kingdom was particularly great, and honestly, the Scott the Woz video sums up a lot of my complaints with the game, so just watch that instead. The only other real complaint I have with Tears of the Kingdom is how much farming there is. I have been having a good time running around and collecting items post-game and doing quests post-game. Like, I'll just Google, how do I get Skyward Sword armor, and then I will go and find and figure it out now that I have an objective, just stuff to do. And I've been having tons of fun with the gameplay and finding these treasure chests and doing these quests and just interacting with the game as a game. However, I decided to collect and upgrade the Fierce Deity armor, and that requires me to farm dragon parts, which is, oh my god, the worst. You have to find the specific dragon for the specific part, hit the specific part on the dragon, and then collect the item before it falls into the abyss. But you can only get one item per dragon every 10 minutes. So you have to just constantly just either hang around the dragon and go do something else, or keep finding the dragon again and coming back and hunting the parts over and over. And that's just for those parts of the dragon. There's dragon farming, and then there's Hinox guts farming or Lionel horn farming or whatever, and that requires you to mark all the spots on the map where you've seen Hinoxes and Lionels, and then you gotta just warp around the map and kill all of them in hopes they drop the right organs you need. Otherwise, you gotta spam through the days until you get a red moon so they can respawn, and then you do that all over again. And that's all annoying, and then you might go, well, Drew, not everybody wants to farm and upgrade those specific pieces of gear, and that's fine. But you also have to farm food to heal yourself, and farm the sun dandelions or whatever they're called to heal gloom, and then you have to farm money because everything is expensive and rupees don't casually drop at a very good rate. There is so much farming in this game, and I think that is something I really wish doesn't come back in any future Zelda title. I like playing the game, I don't like farming in it. Whining aside, the moment-to-moment gameplay and the visuals and the exploration, so much of what made Breath of the Wild good is the same stuff that makes Tears of the Kingdom good. Even when someone like me, who's kind of a hater, plays this game, it's really hard not to have fun. You have to actively try to be miserable to not enjoy yourself. It's a good game, but my old bitter bones really hopes I can get a different type of 3D Zelda after this one.